26th President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, was elected as the Vice President to William McKinley in the election of 1900. When President McKinley was assassinated just 6 months into their term, the 43-year-old Vice President assumed the presidency. The next 7.5 years of Teddy Roosevelt would prove to be a turning point in our nation's rich history. Today, I plan to inform you about the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt by describing his square deal domestic policy and his bold and assertive foreign policy. Teddy Roosevelt's domestic policy has been self-described as the square deal. In his 1910 speech, New Nationalism, he said, quote, "I stand for the square deal. When I say that I am for the square deal, I mean not merely that I stand for fair play under the present rules of the game, but that I stand for having those rules changed so as to work for a more substantial equality of opportunity and of reward for equally good service." Roosevelt's square deal had three main points: control of corporations, consumer protection, and conservationism. Amidst the Industrial Revolution, workers worked long, hard hours in poor conditions for meager pay. Also, because of the Industrial Revolution, corporations developed trusts, or large monopolies, over most aspects of the economy. For example, according to historian Martin Kelly in an article in ThoughtCo, John D. Rockefeller is said to have controlled about 90% of the American oil industry. A decade before Teddy Roosevelt took office, the poorly written and poorly enforced Sherman Antitrust Act was pushed by Congress to break up these monopolies, but it actually didn't do very much. According to a Corporate Finance Institute article on the Sherman Antitrust Act, this anti-monopoly legislation only was put to use when Teddy Roosevelt used his Department of Justice to sue the Northern Securities Company, the largest trust in America at the time. The Northern Securities Company was a coalition of railroads in the continental Northwest that dominated the industry. This case saw the first of more than 40 trusts to be broken up in the span of Teddy Roosevelt's presidency. President Roosevelt became known as the trust buster because of his antitrust policy and the antitrust precedent he set in Congress. Similar to how President Roosevelt broke up trusts to keep prices low, he also pushed for a legislation to protect consumers. According to an article by the Modern Farmer, leading men in the Spanish-American War, Roosevelt lost thousands due to spoiled meat amidst the embalmed meat crisis of 1898. At this time, there were no business safety regulations, nutrition facts, ingredient lists, or health inspections of any meat packing plants. Seeing the effects of this unregulated beef industry on his soldiers, he pushed for the Pure Food and Drugs Act and the Meat Inspection Act, which forbade the sale of, quote, adulterated or misleading drugs, and the latter required government inspection of meat packing plants. Similar to how corporations ran unregulated, the environment also had few government protections. In his lifetime, he saw the bison be brought to near extinction, the factories boom, and corporations abuse the environment with little ramification. He wrote about the future of the environment, saying, quote, "We have become great because of the lavish use of our resources, but the time has come to inquire seriously what will happen when our forests are gone, when the coal, the iron, the oil, and the gas are exhausted, when the soils have still further impoverished and washed into the streams, polluting the rivers, denuding the fields, and obstructing navigation." Roosevelt created the United States Forest Service, and according to the National Park Service, 230 million acres of public land were set aside for national parks, and 150 of those million acres were set aside for national forests. In 1906, he passed the Act for the Preservation of American Antiquities, which gave the president power to declare national monuments. And with this newfound power, he declared 19 national monuments, everything from the Grand Canyon in Arizona to Devil's Tower in Wyoming. President Roosevelt's square deal domestic policies were greatly influential at the time and certainly today, with his breaking up of monopolistic trusts, his consumer protecting business regulations, and his environmental conservationism. Abroad, the Bullish president was very influential as well, with his big stick diplomacy in Latin America and especially Panama. Theodore Roosevelt described his bold and assertive foreign policy by quoting a West African proverb. Many of you may have heard it. Quote, "Speak softly and carry a big stick. You'll go far." The big stick diplomacy ideology was indicative of his belief in having peaceful negotiations backed by a big stick or a strong military. We can clearly see this put to use in Latin America. For context of American affairs in Latin America, we go back to the 1820s. In 1823, President Monroe gave his Monroe Doctrine speech in Congress, where he essentially said that the Old and New Worlds ought to remain separate, that Europe ought not to pursue any more colonial affairs in Latin America. Almost 80 years later, the Dominican Republic finds itself in crippling debt to Europe, to the point where European debt collectors threaten invasion to collect their debts. Roosevelt, fearing the presence of a European military on American front in Latin America, declared his Roosevelt Corollary. He added on to the Monroe Doctrine by saying not only should America and Europe remain separate, but if Europe pursues affairs in Latin America, America will step in to intervene. He said if Latin America pursues any, quote, chronic wrongdoing, in this case, debt and civil unrest, then America will be there to intervene and protect Latin America from Europe. And with his newfound Roosevelt Corollary, in 1905, he sent the American military to the Dominican Republic to manage their finances until the European debts were satisfied. Another country that Roosevelt was greatly influential in is the country of Panama. Since the 1850s, the United States wanted a canal through Panama to split the continent in half. See, at this time, to move ships from one coast to another, say Wilmington to Los Angeles, you had to sail all the way around the tail of South America. But with a canal cutting the continent in half, you could effectively half the time it took and half the resources it took to move ships. During this time, Panama was a part of in rebellion to Colombia. So Roosevelt saw this as an opportunity. He thought, if we can help the Panamanians in the revolution of Colombia, we can negotiate at the end of the revolution that Panama gives us the canal zone, so we can finally build that Panama Canal. And that's exactly what happened. After construction of the Panama Canal, the American economy and military was greatly benefited because we could half the time it took to move ships across the Atlantic and Pacific. He bridged the Atlantic and Pacific. Teddy Roosevelt's square deal domestic policies and precedent-setting foreign policies have been greatly influential both in their time and today. And I hope that by joining me and learning about this progressive president, you would have developed a greater understanding of our country's rich history. Thank you.